Hi everyone, this is Terry. Today we'll be talking about the basics on the Luminaire when you first turn your machine on and what to expect. The first thing you'll see are some beautiful screens, and you can set it up so that you have your own picture coming up on the front of the screens, but I really enjoy seeing these. Just touch the screen and you're able to come to the home page. You know you're at the home page anytime you see sewing, embroidery, the Disney, and my design center. Let's look right below it. This is your clock. You can set up the clock by turning it on or off. I'll turn it off so you can see that what the display looks like now. All you see is the image of a clock. I'll turn it back on. You enter the year, the month, and the day, and a battery is inside your machine that saves this. You'll also notice that there is the option to choose a 24-hour clock, and in my case, I'd rather not have the military time, so I have mine set up for the time. It is actually 10:32 a.m. as I'm recording this, so let me choose OK. Alright, now let's look at sewing. When you go into sewing, you'll see that you have several icons on your screen. I'll cover these more in depth in separate videos, but you can choose between utility stitches and character stitches, and there's much more, which I said would be covered in a separate video. We'll select home at this time in the upper right hand corner. And when we go to home, we can go into embroidery. I don't have my embroidery unit on right now, and that's one reason why you're not hearing something move around. But even though I don't have it on, I can select a design, and let me just go ahead and choose from one of the categories a design, and I'll choose this design. So now you can see that I can work without my embroidery unit on and design, but in order to sew it out, obviously I'll have to have that unit on. I'll go ahead and choose return. It takes me back to the main screen. I can go into Disney designs from here. Let me choose return, and I can also go to my design center. When I go to my design center, if I want to go back to home, all I have to do is select home in the upper right hand corner. Now I showed you Disney a moment ago, but you can go directly to the Disney designs, and we'll go back to home, and you can go directly to my design center from the home page. Let's go back to home. Now let's look at the icons on the top of the screen. What you see on the top of the screen, first of all, is your wireless LAN. Over on the left-hand side, my finger is right beneath it. I recorded a separate video showing you how to set up your wireless LAN. You know that it is enabled because, first of all, you're seeing the signal. You see that it is on, and it identifies my network. I went into the wireless LAN setup wizard to set it up, and I also changed my machine name. I happen to have PE Design 11, so I make sure that whenever I set up my PE Design 11, I'm choosing this network and also this machine name to send designs. You can see the wireless LAN's signal strength going into this screen. And if you happen to need to go in and set up your TCP/IP or proxy settings, you can do so here. I will tell you that I did not have to do that because I just went through the wireless LAN setup wizard. I have a Comcast Xfinity broadband network, and it worked beautifully. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen that I have 11-11. This means that I'm on a settings page. If you look at the top of the screen, you'll notice that there's a reverse blue behind the next icon after the camera, and this is my settings page. Now let's go ahead and choose OK. Now let's select the next icon, and before I do that, I was going to raise my presser foot, and I get an error message that I can't do it at this time. And I wanted to show you an error message so that you understand what the error messages look like. This means that at this time I cannot raise my presser foot when I go into this menu. I select OK and clear the error. I'll select the camera, and when I have the camera selected, you can see my hand underneath the camera. If I happen to put a piece of fabric under it, you can see the fabric. And you can also set up a grid, and you can also set up to identify where the needle is at this time. If you happen to hear squeaking noises, I have a very playful boxer and she has her toys. I apologize, but she'll either bark or play in the background. We'll just listen to her play. Okay, we'll clear this screen. We'll go to the next, and it's the settings. As I mentioned, there are 11 pages of settings. I'll have a separate video because there is a lot of information to cover, and I don't want to cover that in this video. To move between the setting pages, all you do is use the arrow. Okay, we'll now select the next icon, which takes us into our help screens. This is where you can look at the online manuals, and the nice thing about these manuals, as you update your machine, there are updates if there are changes in the manual. I opted to have mine printed as well because I'm a visual person and I like to refer to my manuals. And honestly, it is faster than scrolling on this screen. I also have downloaded my manuals to my iPad, and I review them at night if I'm trying to learn something new about the machine. You can see there are 229 pages in this manual. I can advance one page at a time forward and backwards, or I can go to the very last page or to the very first page by using these arrows. I can also type in a search. We'll type camera and choose search. Now what will happen is every instance of camera that is in this manual has been highlighted. I can enlarge the screen by selecting the magnifying glass. I'll make it 400, and I can actually scroll on the screen by swiping with my fingers, very much like a tablet, and I can squeeze in also. It's somewhat difficult because I have a camera in front of me, but I hope that you see that camera is highlighted in yellow. Let me go ahead and reduce the size. If you notice, when I pinched in, I was reducing the size of my screen, and that's reflected in the upper left corner. So let me select that. We'll go back to 100%. Now you can go to the next instance of camera by using these arrows, and it will tell you, if you keep pressing it, to wait a moment while it has a chance to refresh. This is one of the reasons I like the paper manual. But if I didn't have it here, it makes it nice for me to be able to find what I'm looking for directly on my machine. Now we'll choose close. You do have the option when you go into the PDF manual to go into the embroidery manual and to see your license agreements. We'll go ahead and return. Now it returns us back to the help screen, and we can go into the operation guide. The nice thing about the operation guide is if you want to know what some of the basic operations are, the principal parts of your machine, this is the one way to look at it. Let's look at principal buttons, because I was going to talk to you about what's on the head of your screen, so let's talk about that right now. Now you can select each button, and we want to choose first from the bottom. And if you press this button, you can start sewing. This is your start-stop button, and it will tell you specifically how to use the button and when the button will change colors. We'll choose return. The next button that you'll see is going to be your reverse stitch button. And this is what you will use when you're using straight or zigzag stitches. You can also use it when you're sewing reinforcement stitches. We'll return. The next button that you will see will be the reinforcement stitch button. Depending on the stitch that you have, some of your stitches have a reinforcement stitch that stitches in place 3 to 5 stitches at a time, and some of them have a reinforcement that goes back and forth that is the second button. So depending on which stitch you select, this will, if you use this will allow you to sew reinforcement stitches at the beginning or end of a pattern. You can also set up your machine so it does some of that automatically for you. On the next button on the head of your machine, we'll find the needle up, needle down. I like to sew with my needle down, but if I press this twice, what it will do is it will sew a single stitch. If I press it, it will also raise and lower the needle, and we'll choose return. The next button that we have is our scissor button, and the scissor button is just for that. It allows you to trim your stitches. So if you're sewing straight stitches and you're ready to stop, you press that button, it'll cut your threads. We'll return. The next button you'll see is your presser foot, and with your presser foot you can press that button to raise and lower it. You also notice that you have a conventional handle at the back of your machine, and that handle allows you to raise your presser foot up so that you can move your presser foot to get your fabric under the foot if the foot is down. You will also need to make sure that that is up, so when you are threading your machine, because you'll notice that there is a little piece of plastic that comes down and prevents you from getting your thread through the take-up lever on your machine. Let me go ahead and show you that, because I don't know that some people have found this, and what I'm doing is I'll be I'll be raising this lever that I've told you is on the back of the machine. You see it here. Now what I'll do is I'll raise it up, and when I raise it up, you notice this little plastic cover has moved back. I remember when I had one of my earlier Brother machines, I thought it was broken because I couldn't thread my machine and get to the take-up lever, which is just a little metal piece that you can see just below. So if I lower it again, now you notice that I don't have the ability to thread my machine. We'll go back and look at the screen. Okay, then we'll return. Now the next button that we have is the slider bar, which we don't have on the screen. We have it in another location. But this slider bar can slow down or speed up your machine in the sewing mode. It can also be used when you're sewing satin stitches to sew a narrow or wider stitch. You need to have your settings set up that way. The next button is for threading your needle automatically. You make sure that you take it all the way through the thread path and through number 6 and through the lips of the needle threader, and when you press that, your machine will go ahead and automatically thread the needle. I'll show this in another video, but it's very important when you're doing this that you have a thread that will fit the needle size. And you cannot use the automatic needle threader if you have specialty needles like double thread needles or wing needles, or even a needle that has a much smaller hole. So keep that in mind. All right, we'll return. Now we'll return out of this menu, but you can see that you can travel around on your machine if you have questions about how to do something, such as winding your bobbin. There are several screens that will take you right through it step by step. You just need to know where to find the information. The next section is the sewing guide. And if I select the sewing guide, I'll get an error message, but I'll go on and do that so you'll see it. and it says it can't be used at this time. The reason it cannot be used at this time is I need to be in the sewing mode. So let me correct that message, and let me go ahead and close the screen. I'll go into sewing. Now I'll go back to help, and I'll select the sewing guide. Now I can look at several areas. Let's say that what I wanted to do was to create a blind hem stitch. This will give me the option to select the type of blind stitch that I want to use, and it'll take me directly there in the sewing screen. I also have step-by-step instructions about how to fold my fabric. Let's go back to home. And by the way, I can change the stitch length here, and I can change the tension or the width on the screen at this time. But once I have these options that are in blue, we'll go back to home and choose OK. Go back into sewing, and you can see now I'm back on the straight stitch on my machine. We'll go ahead now and go back to help, and we'll go to the pattern explain button. Now what this does, depending on where you are, it will explain what that stitch is used for. Let's go back to sewing, and let's see what happens if we select another stitch. So let's choose an overcast stitch. We'll go into help. We'll choose pattern explain, and you have 2 pages of information telling you how to use this stitch and which foot to use. We'll go back to help. Well, we're in help, so we'll go back to home and choose OK. Now let's go back to help, and let's go to video. There are several videos that are on our machine, and since the Luminaire was introduced, the videos have been updated. So you may need to reload those videos on your USB and install them on your machine. Just follow the instructions at Brother's site. Let's choose a video so that we can see what it looks like. And let's go ahead and choose this one. What you'll see is the video will show you how to, in this case, do your needle up, needle down. And you'll notice that there's no sound. Let's go ahead and move fast forward through it. And this will take us to the end of the video. If we wanted to see this repeatedly, we can press the loop button and we'll see it repeatedly. So we'll let it go ahead and play out, but I want you to see that it will be playing again over and over as long as you have the loop selected. You can save these into memory and move them over to a USB stick if you want to and watch it on your computer. Let's choose close. Okay, and by the way, you can also look at other videos on your screen. They have to be in a separate format. I will cover that later. You can cover or look at videos covering everything from your settings and maintenance on your machine and your accessories. There are a lot of videos in your system, so take advantage of watching those. We'll choose return. And we'll close out. Now the next icon, as I mentioned to you earlier because we saw the video, this locks your screen. I can't do anything on the screen. It also prevents me from starting and stopping on the head of my sewing machine, so I can change a needle or a presser foot, and this way I don't, if I accidentally had my foot on my pedal, I'm not going to sew through my fingers. Let's go ahead and turn that off. The next actually locks my screen, so I can't do anything on my screen. And when this is helpful, let's unlock it. Let's go into sewing. And let's say I was sewing a binding on a quilt, and I don't want to interfere with my stitch length or anything by inadvertently touching the screen. If I touch this lock button, you'll notice that I cannot change any of these settings. If I unlock it again, I can change it. So this is very helpful, and I have used it for the purpose I mentioned before, sewing the binding on my quilt. Now we'll look at the next icon, which is home. So we've traveled all around the screen. We've talked about the buttons on our machine, and in our future videos we'll talk about the details of our settings pages. Thank you. I hope you have a great day.